My
Elon
biggest
Musk.
fears are World War III. My biggest fears are being on a database. My biggest fears are what the country is doing to working class folk.
They're
If
committing
you
a
touch US
crime.
American soil, you are guaranteed by law to
No, that's not how
apply
it
for
works.
asylum.
You said that we should have open borders. Did you not? You believe
Yeah,
that anybody
yeah,
should
I
be able to come
believe
in and out of
genuinely
the
in open
country.
borders.
Okay, thank you. Work with the
Mohammed
media.
Khalil
You
is
want to
being
work with the media?
arrested because he passed out flyers and
You're
because
working with the
the flyer
media
said, "Help
propaganda
to
arm.
America." News of white
They were
America.
caught and released by Biden multiple
Yeah.
times.
Do you want me to read the reports on? I mean, I could do the same thing. What you're doing is just nonsense.
You don't intentionally let
White
violent people
Americans,
into your
I'm not
country.
done. White Americans, my white Americans have also raped and murdered. I can.
I'm talking about letting
So
people
in
who we
short,
know are criminals
if
and
you,
terrorists into the country.
in
Americans have
short,
died.
yeah, and so have women by white Americans. Allow
Why did
me,
Joe Biden release him?
you're not answering.
Why
So
did he release him multiple times and then he came and killed that girl, that 15-year-old girl?
as we
Why did
wrap
he
up,
release him? He was a
right.
violent criminal with a record and he had been caught multiple times. He was illegal. Why wasn't he deported?
Welcome to Bantercast Live. Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca, all the way from San Francisco. I'm here in SF with my co-host, Echin Socialist Andy Lipson, who is in Oakland at the time, and we have seen each other finally during
Yay.
my time here in my visit in California. We're online at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as at Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. We have merch as well. If you fancy a shirt, contact us through our site at whatsleftpodcast.com. Thank you. All right. Andy, can you do us the favor of sharing the
Look
topic?
at you flaunting your microphone, So, so Eduardo's getting big time now. He's got himself a microphone and he's speaking close to it to sound so wonderful. Um, but no, this episode started well when I found out that you were cheating on me with another man. Um, uh, so I I mean, people have heard about a friend of Eduardo's, Jacob Schmidt, not our John Kleisik or Jake Kleisik, who's also a
Right.
friend of Eduardo's, but a longtime friend. And you guys come from very different political roads. Um, and in many ways, actually, what's left itself, its origins come out of conversations that you were having with Jacob Schmidt.
Schmidt.
Yes, and even drawing me into those, and it just that was actually part of what started what's left that period. Anyway, now Jacob has asked you to join him on a kind of a dueling podcast called Bantercast, which you had told me you had done, and I didn't even know, um, and it's similar to what's left in that Eduardo's on it, but it has a very different vibe.
Very different.
And and you had called me about like, hey, maybe we should, could we post these episodes on
Yeah.
what's left, particularly so you could, in some ways, you want people to know about it because you're what's left, and you wanted our audience to know about something that you're doing weekly. You'd also wanted their support potentially, because it's a very much more combative environment there. But I said, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. This is our what's left audience, um, and you were like, wait a second, but so we kind of went back and forth, and I realized that one way we could really do this is to introduce what you're doing on Bantercast, why you're doing it, let our audience know, why this is important, and then really, I do think what's going to come as a result of this is, maybe people will get not just what's left weekly, but if you are subscribed on YouTube, um, you'll get possibly a weekly Bantercast that where you get to see Eduardo. I don't know if you wanted it weekly or if you wanted to pick episodes,
We'll
but
see.
yeah, but I think it was necessary to do this, but also it was clear that you had kind of taken a journey here and you wanted to talk about it, and so I thought, let's talk about what the heck are you doing there on Bantercast?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I I think we should start from the very beginning. I was I had come back from Europe. Trump was elected 2016, and I was back in the USA in 2017. And I think what happened was there was a lot of political um, there was a lot of political uproar from the liberal left, the progressive left, uh, that uh, I think forced Jake and I to have conversations we hadn't had before. And we were having tough discussions on the phone, and I was a little incredulous as what was how he was developing his political journey. And we both have come from the same conservative Christian background. He and I met in Idaho when I was visiting another friend in Emmett, Idaho. And I was getting to know the congregation. I wanted to see other parts of the USA. I've heard of conservative red states, but I had never been in one as an adolescent. I mean, I'd driven by in Utah or things like that, but these were sort of like specific destinations. I wanted to go to rural town uh, uh, places, and there was an opportunity for me, and so it presented itself, and I went. And I went with someone who was very critical of me, who bashed me constantly. And Jake was not like that. I mean, he approached me at the congregation that I was attending, and out of all the group of all the boys, he was the one who really reached out to me and showed interest in becoming my friend. And then I had returned to Emmett, Idaho, and I was 17 and he was 16 at the time. And then we just hit it off, and I stayed with him for months after that. Because I'd returned to SF, didn't know what I wanted to do, so I stayed with him for some time. And I had a girlfriend there, and it was really that rite of passage that gave me a chance to experience what friendships in a male space looked like. And I didn't have a lot of friends in SF that were my age, because as Jehovah's Witnesses know, you kind of get restricted from meeting other people unless they're part of the congregation. And my congregation didn't have a lot of young people. Anyhow, so we hit it off really well. And through that time, he and I have tried to make sense of the world and our backgrounds and who we are and our identities. And there were experiences that I had in rural Idaho that didn't sit well with me, such as because I was surrounded by mostly everyone was really white boys, heterosexual boys, and they would say things that I think would be rebuked or censored in a U.S. American public San Franciscan school.
Yeah.
But I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't know how to defend myself. I didn't know how to say something smart, cheeky, or any way that played that male banter. Like I wasn't versed in that way of talking yet. I didn't come from a family like that. And so, but he brought me along, and there were things that he said and other friends said that I don't think, if we were to talk about political correctness, they were definitely not in the realm of political correctness.
Mhm.
But I know that a lot of ignorance is surrounds young people, and we have had those discussions, and I genuinely think that Jacob has a lot of affection for me as his close friend. I don't think he is a racist. I think Jacob said things that he didn't even know what it meant for himself. I know he didn't even have the experience of visiting other worlds, like other states, other countries, and so his knowledge was limited to what he knew in his town. Anyhow, so over time, though, I don't think that we talked a lot about politics until 2017, until 2018, because our biggest clash was Charlottesville, and what happened to the young woman that was killed. She was run over by a vehicle because there were KKK members and there were other protesters happening in Charlottesville, and she was killed. And I was really, I was hurt by what was happening. And then we talked about it, and I couldn't believe the things that he was saying, like about the things that I had learned about white privilege or in progressive circles. And here we were having a conversation about just that. And I'd never talked to him about white privilege before and the different experiences that I have as being Latino in the USA and as a person of color. And here he was telling me that, he's experienced discrimination. And I had a hard time really listening to him at that time. We both were left, I suppose, kind of unheard. And then we continued having these conversations on the phone, and I just could not fathom how we were so different at this point in our lives. I realized that we'd grown up, and late into our 20s and early 30s, I think we were just beginning to understand how different we have become. I called you at that time, and I said, I need support, I need help. Like, you're a white male heterosexual man, and you could potentially knock some sense into this boy. That was my thinking at the time. Now I don't think that anymore. But we had conversations. We did, and we had I think it was a virtual call once, and you did, and just hearing you being a socialist drove him mad, and that was like he blocked himself, and Jacob style, he just talked over anybody, and he didn't listen to you, and I suppose I wanted to do something about it, and I wanted to create. There was at the time so many podcasts exist now, but at that time I felt maybe I could create a channel or some podcast. And I don't know if I was ready to do it with Jacob, honestly. I think there's too many feelings involved. I still was hurt from not being heard or listened. I had other different views at the time. And it would have been a disaster, I think, because as I'm realizing in working with him now, in the maturity that I can handle things. I know how to assert myself, and I have the experience to understand what to differentiate the personal versus just differences in the way that we work that I wouldn't have been able to differentiate at the time. So it would have been a disaster. I had shared with you that I had that desire, and you had said, hey, why don't we do it? I've left the ISO. I'm a lone wolf politically. I am trying to figure myself out too.
I use exactly that word too. I remember a lone wolf. Yeah.
Exactly. And you said, and I'm trying to find other people maybe like-minded. Maybe it might be a little signal out there for anyone that thinks alike, or I don't know, that I'm also departing myself from that socialist progressive left. And it may not be pretty, and I want a safe space.
Right.
People can look at our first episode and see our intentions, and it was perfect because here I was trying to figure myself out. And at heart, I did think that a lot of Marxist readings did call to me, and anarchist readings did, but I just didn't see the potential in it, because I thought we can bring about change gradually and then transform it into revolution.
Right.
But I had that in my heart. It was like, I'm a revolutionary at heart, but I'm not a revolutionary in the real world, as I would used to say, right? I'm quoting here for folks that are not who are not viewing our episode. And you truly did challenge me. We did go head to head on many things, and I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Say that I think you used the word safe space, but I think what we were really for me, I remember really, and I think it is, you could call it safe, but what I wanted was an honest space, an actual workshop to get real tools out, work on the cardboard and the wood and the nails, and really see what I thought about it. And I needed somebody who would disagree with me, but would disagree with me honestly and in a way where they weren't going to just kind of move around, no matter what, the way that I
Yeah.
was with liberals. And that to me was the real thing that made it not just safe, I would say, but meaningful to have these
Yeah.
discussions.
Yes, exactly. And that was the space we created. And, through those open, honest conversations, we've grown. I think both of us
Yeah.
evolutionized from where we started, and look at us now. I mean, we think in so many aspects alike because of what has transpired through those years. Thanks to so many individuals who have come onto What's Left and been guests and co-guests and co-hosts, excuse me, because many of them have become hosts. And we've looked at ourselves and we've had raw videos that I think people don't really look at them because they're not informational. They're sort of just revelatory.
Yeah.
We just think out loud, and we have acknowledged when we're wrong. We have acknowledged when we don't know something. We acknowledge we're not experts. And you giving me lots and lots of freedom. I appreciate you every single year because you have given me the freedom to be me, Andy. I appreciate you. I do. I really do, because I I used to get so nervous and have so many rackets in my head about my recordings, and I want to cut this and cut that and cut this, and it'd be so perfect, and I didn't know how to. I didn't feel comfortable in my skin. I didn't feel comfortable with my voice. I didn't feel comfortable with my accent. I didn't feel comfortable with my body. I didn't feel comfortable with what I shared. I felt stupid many times, and you never made me feel that way. And you'd say, I don't see that. I don't, and you'd reassure me, and I'd have these anxiety attacks because I'd feel like I'm not fluent in political language, so to speak.
Right.
And I have in my head, I know what I want to say, but it's not coming out. It's not spitting out. So it just wasn't going to work with my close friend Jake, because he's a peer. We have baggage as close friends from our youth, and our egos were in the way. And I mean, and you and I didn't have that. We've butted heads, but through that butting heads, I think it's given a chance to like grow from those areas, which I don't think that I would have been able to do with my close friend Jake. And so we've grown, and real life on the ground experiences changed me, such as 2020. The lockdowns changed me, and the isolation, the alienation, the ousting, the outcast that I felt as. And so in those times, we drew closer because of our work together, using the space as a place to come to for us to think out loud and to share that with the world if anyone is watching. And, against the algorithms and against all odds because of political speech being censored. And so, anyhow, I appreciate that with you, and we'll have to do some anniversary What's Left at some time. But I always talk about this, and I never get bored of repeating some of the things that I have said in other episodes, and especially for new audience, because I think it's important to look back at where we've come and to always reflect. And I'll do it every single year, so if people get bored, just fast forward. Anyhow, well, here we are, and I'm here in 2025, and Donald J. Trump has been elected again. And we started What's Left as a challenge in the mainstream left, because we come from that tradition, the leftist tradition, as a socialist, or as maybe our backgrounds might have come from the left originally, but I'm saying politically, like where we really have developed or stayed the longest and developed ideas and thought critically have been through leftist circles.
Mhm.
And you definitely spent so much time of your life in the ISO, International Socialist Workers Party, or so International Socialist Workers, right? Is that
International Socialist Organization.
organization? Excuse me. Thank you. And so, we hear. Oh, right. So we've been. I hope you edit that. Through time, we have criticized both. At the time, it was Trump, but we try not to make it about Trump because that's what the liberal left would have wanted us to do.
Mhm.
And that's what I was doing as well. But it was also Biden administration. We've also criticized the Obama administration. We've criticized so many Democrats and Republicans and the same wings of the same bird. And here we are in 2025, and as part of a subversive, oh no, not subversive, but maybe subgroups of 2020, a mixture of leftist and right groups, we see again people forming themselves in line, separating themselves in what was before 2020, which I had thought that 2020 was sort of a way for us to finally get together and mesh our lives away from the spectrum, this left and right line of political thought, and really see the complications where we are going to have to challenge ourselves but not define ourselves in these divisions as the Democrats and Republicans wanted to do. But you'll be seeing again people lining themselves, and some voting for Trump and others not voting for Trump, and everyone doing the anti-Trump thing now in Democrat blue zones in the USA. It's unfortunate.
And simultaneously, many people who were talking about freedom and surveillance and free speech now doing a pro-Trump dance, and also talking about being anti-war even, and now they're basically supporting a candidate who supports war, supports surveillance, supports taking down free speech. So that we find ourselves not just dealing with hypocrisy from the left, but hypocrisy from the right, while trying to say this left-right thing probably is not a good place to really figure out where you are to define yourself.
Right. So, namely, the freedom movement that I thought was, saying or doing something, and who have become a part of our audience, have generally supported this Trump administration. Many people that we know think that Trump is, the answer, or the peace president, and the anti-censorship president, and it's just falling in line with just how sheep move. Again, we're doing the same thing repeatedly, and we have lost again that working class unionship that I thought we could move ahead with, moving away from our identities as left or right. But anyhow, here we are. And I've been thinking and reflecting a lot in the past this past year, especially on a personal level, but on a political level, I have, and I've been asking myself, what's next for myself? What I do? And when Trump was elected, when I saw the elections, whatever we think of the elections, the fact that I saw people again pouring themselves into supporting a president, in fooling themselves that this is a president of freedom of speech, of little government.
Mhm.
I thought, that it says something about the people who are lining themselves in support of Trump. I must somehow I don't know. I thought there should be something that should be done. And my friend Jake, again, voted for Trump. And Jacob supports Trump. And we had these phone conversations that have been long, and we've debated. And I thought, let's do something. Let's record. Let's get these conversations. Maybe that will do something. Maybe I can have these conversations. And I did try, but I'm horrible. I'm horrible at posting and editing, and that's why Andy's here. And and Jake was upset with me, and we didn't post it on What's Left or anything. And he's like, "What if we do it again?"
Just let people know that there was many months ago, there was one recording you guys did
in November,
just prior to Trump's election, where you had this notion that maybe we'd post it on What's Left.
Yeah.
Where you and Jacob were talking, just discussing, debating even the Trump election, and whether a person should or should not vote for Trump. It never came to light. And that,
I mean, it was a recording on the night of the elections. And
yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah. So it was not meant to be.
So Jacob and I thought about, he said, why don't we do it? Why don't we do a podcast? And I said, sure. And we created Bantercast Live. We're on Rumble and on X, formerly Twitter, and now we're on YouTube. And I thought it'd be a more conversation, or a sort of take your turn kind of the way we do What's Left. And I think we tried, we attempted, but as you will see in some of the clips that I'm going to share, it has been a combative space for both of us. And we both interrupt each other, but you'll see Jacob say I interrupt him, and then I say he interrupts me, and Andy laughs through them, but you have to be fast and you have to be quick on your feet. And I realize the training that I've had as a Jehovah's Witness, as someone that's been in political campaigns and on What's Left especially, and also as an advocate in schools, and challenging also people's thoughts and ideas on politics on the streets or wherever I'm at, or even talking about things, organizing. You learn to be quick. You learn to challenge, and you learn how to pull out the tools in your toolbox.
Right.
But it's not a very friendly space for guests. I would say that. So if anyone would like to come onto that, it's not like What's Left where we take turns.
Bring your knives if you're.
I know Jake wants us to have a more dialogue approach. I would like that as well, but I just think our dynamic is he says shit, I say shit, and then suddenly it becomes, back and forth, and no one lets go. And
you want to show a first clip here just to see? And
sure, I think I'll share from the first episode. Here we are. We'll discuss here. All right, so let me just share.
What land?
Right.
I'm telling you, it's something that you do, and you keep bringing it up. Hamas. It doesn't make
because that's who rules
but it doesn't change the fact.
Can you hear?
Doesn't change the
Yeah, I can totally.
fact that I'm telling you, Israelis are occupying land, and it's something you should acknowledge. And
were they occupying land on October 7? What land were they occupying to deserve 1,300?
I mentioned what land they were. I
brutally killed.
Told you what they've been occupying: the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Golan Heights. They've been annexing it since the 80s. Since this has been happening.
So what did it on October 7? Then what exactly happened on October 7 to justify the 1,300 plus people that died?
That's what Hamas did. I'm not talking about Hamas. I'm talking about Palestinian land being occupied. Can you just
all the Palestinian people were cheering about this. The majority of the Palestinian people supported and were cheering about this. It's absolutely.
I'm sure Israelis and Palestinians. I've seen
actually one of the
hate
one of
each
the
other.
ladies who was taken hostage. By the way, they still have hostages there. They still have
And they're also I could show a video
that they've been
of
holding.
I could also talk about Israeli hostages that have been very grateful to Hamas for not doing anything harm to them, because they didn't do any harm to them. So, I mean, are we going to discuss
they should be
anecdotal
happy
evidence?
that they were treated.
No, I'm just
some
saying,
of them
though,
were treated
again. But if you couldn't discuss anecdotal evidence,
the hostages should be happy about how they were treated. Is that what
no? I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you, you're bringing up some lady that said that whatever.
No, I was trying to mention there was a lady, one of the ladies who was actually taken hostage. She talks about the way
and
how
there's
they were
another
treated,
lady that was actually taken hostage this way, and she was also treated quite well.
They're not going to be able to hear us both if we talk over each other.
Well, I mean, we do talk over each other, but that is it. That's the minimal.
That is definitely that's the rhythm I saw. I mean, I do know that at times in the beginning, like of an episode, maybe you'll give each other a little more space, but then before you know it, it is definitely boom, 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 boom.
I mean, we go here. I think we'll get into it.
Like, it's ridiculous. It's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Let's just let everybody in the country not care what they do or what they say or what ties they have, right? I mean, how insane is that? That's how, Edward, that's how the country got to where it is right now. Because Joe Biden decided to open the border and let literally everyone in, including a bunch of criminals.
He didn't open the border.
He didn't open the border. Yeah, that's why millions and millions more people were coming in under Biden. That's why all of a sudden no one's at the border now, because Joe Biden, he didn't open the border, right? I mean,
no, he didn't open the border. There are limits to people who come through the border. I believe in open borders. I have a whole episode on it. But unfortunately, I think what's really happening here is
we have the numbers, Edward. We have the numbers of how many millions of people were coming in under Joe Biden. Like, it's for you to say that he didn't open the border is so blatantly false. It's completely false.
They went to the border. They turned themselves in, and they were arrested by ICE, and they went.
So here's what I want people to get the context. So we have been having discussions on immigration and who we let in, and there is this fear mongering that Jacob is injecting, that I know he's just regurgitating from what he hears about illegal immigrants. And I think what I'm concerned about as we hear this is, what I'm concerned about when we talk about illegal immigration, I'm using his words. I just don't think I have problems with that word. But illegal immigration, you coming into the country irregularly and not doing it through some visa that you can legally get, which is farce if you think that it's easy to get, because I know how my family tries to get them. The limits on immigration, the way that the media, especially what he is listening to is about how illegal immigrants are bringing crime, and he constantly describes bloody scenes, specific people that have committed crime on U.S. Americans, and crime is an issue. Crime is an issue, but it's not done by illegal immigrants. It's done by, regardless of your race, nationality, gender, it's going to happen by people who are mentally ill. I mean, these things happen. But the issue I have with this is that Jacob's trying to talk about crime in the same sentence as illegal immigration, putting those two together, making people believe that that's the issue we have to worry about. And so I really do challenge him on that. So here I'm going to.
Then that we should let a bunch of people into the country who say, no, actually, murder is fine and rape is fine. Do you think that's okay?
Who's saying that?
I'm asking. It's a hypothetical. You love to ask me hypotheticals, so it's a hypothetical. So do you think that'd be a good idea?
I don't think
that'd be a good idea.
Regardless of immigrants.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I could tell you right now, actually, that the extremist.
The way you frame it is immigrants.
Well, some people do believe that
white Americans do it too. White Americans murder and rape. I mentioned the list last episode. It doesn't belong.
Edward.
Murder and rape is
Edward. I'm not saying that murder doesn't happen.
It doesn't
I'm saying in general,
it happens because you're crazy or something's happening in your psyche and you need help. And that's why people commit these things. Not because you're an immigrant or because you're white or because you're Latino. Or
so, Edward, if you ask the majority of Americans if murder and rape are wrong, we're all going to, basically all of us, except for maybe a small exception, or we're all going to agree it's wrong. That's why we have rules and law. That's why we have laws on this, because we all agree. Okay? Some people don't agree. Some people think that if you're raped, you should be put to death. Some people think if you show skin in public, you should be put to death. Okay? Some people believe in honor killings. So do you think people that enshrine that in law and believe that, do you think we should just let them all into our country and say, oh, well, you take over our country now? Do you think that's a good idea?
Again, rape and murder doesn't exist because you're an immigrant. It occurs because you are fucked up.
So you're just going to it doesn't happen because you're immigrant. You're right. It happens because
I'm an immigrant.
You're right.
I'm an immigrant. My mother's an immigrant. Suddenly, automatically.
And did I say? And funny, did I say the word immigrant? No, I don't think I did. That's not what I said.
You talk about
it's not because you're an immigrant. It's because of a religious ideology, which a lot of people happen to believe.
Yes, that's why I'm.
So should we let them into our country? Do you think that would be beneficial for our society if we let a bunch of people in who don't believe, who don't have the same beliefs as we do?
And we wouldn't let them in our society if we actually ruled one. Of course, we wouldn't let people who are murderous in our society if I actually created a collective of people.
Oh, wow, amazing. Thank you.
Don't say that.
So you believe in fucking borders.
You say immigrants.
So
you say immigrants. You tag immigrants. You put in the same sentence immigrants, murderers, and rapists.
I'm glad you believe in borders now. Welcome to the Republican Party.
I don't believe in borders. I believe.
But you just said if we had our own small community, Edward.
We had a community, we don't have borders though.
Edward, let's say we live in
determine borders if you don't want. So let me ask you. So if they're not.
So if we had our own community, if we had our own autonomous community, there'd be no borders.
Borders means
we wouldn't protect. We wouldn't let certain people come in.
If they're not murderers and rapists, let them all in. So we vet them.
Oh, so we should vet them. We should vet them.
No, I'm asking you. Should we vet people? And if they're not murderers and rapists, let them all in. Amazing. I'm asking you.
We should vet people in and not let criminals.
I'm asking you.
We should vet people and not let criminals in.
So if they're not vetted, if they don't turn out to be murderers and rapists, should they stay in the country?
Yeah, I mean, if they haven't committed any
if they're illegally
and they came here legally, they didn't violate any laws, then sure. Oh, but if you came in here illegally, then no, you already violated the law. So
no, well, I mean that you can't be. I'm asking you, if you go into the country and you're illegal.
I'm just glad you believe in borders now. It's good.
I don't believe in borders. I asked you.
So Edward, if we had our own community, would you just let anybody in?
Last time we were speaking, and you said to me that shouldn't speak over you.
I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry.
Last time we were having this conversation, and then you get upset with me when I speak over you, and I'm telling you.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
If you're going to do that tactic, I'm going to do it on you. So if you,
I warned him,
are not a murderer and not a rapist, and you have proven not to be for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but you're still illegal, can they stay?
No, because you came here illegally.
So then what does it matter if they're...
There's a process.
How is that fair to people who came here illegally? This whole thing about murderers and rapists doesn't matter then, because you just want anybody in.
How is it fair to people who came here
illegally? Don't use the murderer and rapist thing. You don't want anybody in, period.
You're being completely cognitive dissonance, right? So much cognitive dissonance here right now. No, you're saying if people aren't criminals, how do you know they're not criminals if they didn't come through a legal port where you can vet them?
That's why I asked you.
Are you going to answer my question? How are you going to know if they're criminals or not if they don't come legally and you vet them? If they just come in illegally and cross the border wherever and then get snatched up, how do you know they're not criminals, Edward? Like you're contradicting yourself here. They have to come in legally through a legal port of entry. If you just cross and you jump over the border and you come over illegally, you should be deported.
There's another question then. So fine. They go in through legally.
How did you get here, Edward? Did you come here legally? Did you come here legally?
I mean, I could talk about my status later. But
Did you come over illegally?
I'm a U.S. citizen. How did I get my citizenship?
Okay, so how'd you get your citizenship? How'd you get it? How'd you get your citizenship? Did you have to follow a process?
My parents.
Did you have to follow a process? Yeah, they had to get in line, right? They had to get in line. They had to pay money.
All right, so we go into.
Well, do you want to talk about?
I'll do this very quickly. And what what happened, we discuss it, and as you can tell, it becomes very hard to talk, and I can't get.
I had to take tests.
So what I tried to do is I really did try to have a conversation, and he asked me questions. Here I go. I get frustrated because if he actually asked me what this is our show, and I wish he would really ask me what I believe in, because what I was trying to say there, if I could just say it here, I think as an anarchist, I don't think that countries would be built. I don't think large societies controlled massively the way that we're doing it now would exist. Mm-hmm. And these borders wouldn't exist. It's almost similar to what tribals lands did before. I think empires and countries, ruling states as the way that we're doing it now, I think that this is the problem, and this is why we're having the issues that we do now. And if we organized ourselves in collectives or communities, they could be big, but not the way that we're doing it now, where you have a whole administration controlling millions and millions of people, what they watch, how they eat, what they do, how they're tracked. I mean, that's a lot of people you are managing. And I think that if we actually worked and invested, unlike some people that think that socialist communities, you become lazy, you have to really work and invest. And if you are a danger, that community will decide how to deal with that dangerous person. And that most likely that will be through a way of ousting or protecting yourself through being armed, or any other way, that if you think someone was actually a danger to you. And he didn't allow me to say any of that. And there's no issue. There's no such thing as illegal immigration, because we wouldn't have a law on migration in a more idyllic society. And so I get frustrated. He shares, and I'll just share these last minutes. And he asked me, what are borders for then? And people might know what borders are for on this episode, but they don't hear it over there. So you can see my frustrated face.
Just like a household, you do not let random people into your house who you do not know. Like, it's common sense. So I'll leave it there.
Right. Notice that here's a third person here, which is called the public. I have tried to keep my mouth shut.
Finally. Well, let me get some words out here.
Maybe that's how strong I am. Well,
I have one more video here to play.
No, let me answer the question. You asked the question.
Oh, okay. You're going to answer? Okay.
Yes. In short, I think what happens is, if you look at the way that the USA in history has managed societies, is they inject fear into society. So we look at the wars on drugs. We look at health scares, such as 2020. We look at terrorism, and that's how we created Homeland Security. And we look at immigrants. And so I think if people who were in 2020 part of the freedom movement, if we actually examine the way that politicians talk about immigrants, that is a way of injecting fear into society. And it's not about murderers and rapists. It's about...
But Americans have died. Jacob, little 15-year-old girls were brutally raped and killed by illegal immigrants who were caught and released multiple times.
You want me to read out recent news of white...
They were caught and released by Biden multiple times.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the reports on... I mean, I could do the same thing. What you're doing is just nonsense. I could read the same thing.
No, it's not nonsense. You don't intentionally let violent people into your country.
White Americans have also raped and murdered. I can bring...
Yeah, Americans who commit crimes get locked up in jail. Americans who commit crimes get locked up in jail.
You want me to list out just...
They get locked up in jail, Edward. They get locked up in jail. Don't read your stupid fucking list, please.
So, anyway,
it's completely irrelevant. I'm talking about letting people who we know are criminals and terrorists into the country.
I asked the public to be observant of what I would respond, and obviously Jake didn't let me.
It's just amazing that you want to bring up random crimes from citizens who we convict, and you want to use that as some excuse to, just let them in.
In short,
just let them in. Americans have died, Edward. Americans have died.
Yeah, and so have women by white Americans. And so...
Yeah, and We don't, and that's why we lock them up for life, because we don't think that those people
not
should be
everyone.
free
A lot of people
in
have
our
been let
society.
out. I have cases.
But you think these people should be free in our society? Otherwise,
No,
why did
that's
Joe
not what I
Biden
said.
So
In
why did Joe
short,
Biden release them?
and I
Why did Joe Biden
I'm
release
not a
the
Biden
guy?
supporter.
Why
I'm
did
not
Joe
a
Biden
Biden-
release the
I'm
guy
not
who
a Biden
raped that
supporter. I'm not a
15-year-old
Biden
girl?
sympathizer. I'm not a Biden.
Why did Joe Biden release him?
I'm not a
He
Biden
was
supporter,
illegal.
and that's what
He
you
was
do. You
illegal.
tag me
He
as
had
one.
He had a record. Why did he release him?
You allow
Why
me,
did Joe Biden release him?
you're not answering. So
Why did he release him multiple times, and then he came and killed that girl, that 15-year-old girl, raped and killed her? Why? Why did he release him? He was a violent criminal with a record, and he had been caught multiple times. He was illegal. Why wasn't he deported? Why did he release him back into the country? Why did this judge want us to turn a plane around to release 200 terrorists back into our jails? Why? What's this obsession with allowing violent people into our country? And then you want to bring up violent people in this country. Yeah, well, we prosecute them. We don't let them in willingly and release them.
I knew quite well, Jacob. Observe, everyone. Observe. Jacob wouldn't
let me.
Amazing.
It's just amazing. I don't know
what
to
let me answer the question.
You want to justify letting violent people in without vetting them.
Let's see how long, Jacob.
Because people commit crimes.
That's why I'm saying we don't, and eventually we'll have to make some rules up. And I hope the public actually makes rules, or we have an intermediator.
I just don't understand how you can say that when Americans have died, Edward. When Americans have died from people coming into the country,
lots of Americans
have died at the hands of other Americans. Nothing's happened.
Americans
so you justify it. So you justify it.
Lots of Americans have died.
So you justify it then. It's okay because
I just don't pick and choose.
It's okay. That's exactly what Joe Biden said.
Crime.
That's exactly what Joe Biden said. He said Laken Riley. He said Laken Riley. What did Joe Biden say? Hold on. What did Joe Biden say?
And white Americans commit the same crime as immigrants, as black.
What did Joe Biden say?
As people who are Trump supporters or Democrats or liberals.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah, everybody commits crime, so it's okay.
You think one crime is better than the other.
What did Joe Biden say about Laken Riley?
You think one life is better than the other. That's why I thought all lives matter.
No, I don't. I think we should vet
one
criminals,
life matters over the other. And the life
I think we should vet criminals.
I
think we should vet criminals.
Are lives that are murdered by immigrants only.
No, I don't think we should release
the victims that are murdered by white Americans. It's unfortunate that you think that we should segregate our society. And that's why you
segregate?
That's why. Yes, I believe that.
Because you're right. You're right. I do believe in segregation. I believe we should segregate violent people from the rest of society.
Lots of people like Jacob want to use immigrants as a scapegoat, and that is what we're trying to have everyone think that it's the immigrants, it's the terrorists, it's all these things that are happening when we ignore the reality of why borders exist. Borders in capitalism aren't just about land; they're about managing inequality in a way that protects profit. They let capital move freely.
Yeah, you're right. They want to. Yeah, you're right. They want to exploit cheap
when it comes to people, especially workers in the global south.
Exploiting cheap labor.
Make sure you understand it, folks. Borders are not to control murder and rape.
Yeah, you're right. The
borders of control. In capitalism,
they have
borders help regulate the flow of goods, capital, and labor. They aren't just about sovereignty. They aren't about just protecting America. They're tools that serve economic interests.
Economic interests.
It's about labor regulation, borders control, who can work where, often allowing capital, money, goods to move freely while restricting the movement of labor. That's what this is about. It's about restricting movement of working class folk. Migrant labor can be exploited more easily because of precarious legal status, reinforcing hierarchies in the workplace. And if you think this is about murders and rapists, you're lied to. That's not what this is about. Capital mobility versus people mobility. That's what this is about. Corporations can easily shift production across borders. You started it. You didn't let me answer. You wanted to do this. I asked.
Are you going to let me get a word in? Are you going to let me get a word in?
Shout match. If you want me to continue like this, then you're going to have to let one of us take turns. But you didn't let me answer.
Are you going to let me?
You didn't let me answer the fucking question. So let's just do
fucking ranting nonsense. You're ranting nonsensical bullshit.
The way that we're doing it. If you want to let us answer, answer the question,
I'm not talking over you. I'm trying to fucking respond.
How does it feel like when you're not allowed to answer the question now? So if you want to allow someone to answer the question, I'll let you answer the question. But if you want me to answer the question, I'll answer the question. So
are you going to let me say a single word?
No, I'm not done. Are you going to let me
not done
answering your fucking question?
Okay, then I'll fucking shout over you, bro. You think that
all right, go ahead. Let's do a podcast like that. Capital mobility versus people mobility.
So how does that benefit them?
shift production across borders. Let's do it. Let me answer the question first.
I want you to fucking let me respond.
All right. Corporations can easily shift production across borders, outsourcing to cheaper labor markets. Workers can't migrate as freely.
I think that ending summarizes a bit of our podcast.
Well,
can you ask me some questions? Maybe this will help. If you could just...
First thing, it's stressful to watch. It causes my stomach to get. I think there was some definite. First of all, who got the name? How did the name Bantercast come up?
We put in a few words in group chat and try to figure this out. It was Jake and I. I think he wanted the word live in. We haven't done many lives because that episode was edited. Actually, part of my speech there was cut at the end.
Right.
There were many times where he walked out on that one. He only showed once. Right. But no, we had the name. We just did a puzzle. Like we just put words together. Yeah.
It was interesting. Earlier on, you talked about male banter, which is those two terms come together. And I was like, interesting, because that's something you are now putting yourself back into, that kind of environment that is sort of, I mean, what I see in that is just sort of, I don't know how much clarity is going to be arrived at, because the goal of each of you is to throw the other person off, and try to get them, to try to trick them, to try to use people's kind of word choices and things like that, not as a means of understanding, but it seems it's a very gotcha thing you guys are doing. And I'm first of all wondering, did you know that it was going to be that way? Did you know it was going to have that kind of character to it?
I had suspected maybe it might be that way given our conversations, but I didn't think I thought we'd be more comported. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Behave. We would behave better if we were doing actual recordings, because I think can be frustrating to hear when two people are shouting and speaking to each other. But if people do look at those episodes, I mean, I do interrupt. I do. I do. I'm not a very passive voice. But if people do look, I give Jacob a lot of time to speak. And then in that clip, the last one I just showed, you notice I'm just waiting for him to finish. And he asked me a question, so I'm trying to respond, and he interrupts me, and he does not let me finish. And so I do my best to carry on, like if he's not interrupting me, because I just don't know when I'll get my turn. And you have to learn how to elbow I'm from Mexico. Have anyone been at the metro in Mexico City? Maybe I'll take you one day, Andy, and then you'll see during rush hour, and you elbow your way in and you get yourself in. Maybe people have been at rush hour on BART or on the subway, wherever, and I think it happens mostly. I mean, I think in Mexico City, you have to fight your place in that metro, and I do not like being that way, but I can be that way. I have been that way in situations where I've advocated for parents against teachers or principals or people who have demeaned others, and I'm a fierce pit bull. I mean, you and I have had back and forths, and you've seen me the way that I am, and we've also fought. You and I, we've had real conflicts, and I'm not a pushover, and I'm not afraid of people getting angry. I'm not afraid of people. I mean, the only thing I'm afraid of is if actually someone has a knife. Other than that, I'm not afraid of your cuss words or your shouts. I'm used to that, and it doesn't intimidate me. So I'm okay with Jacob being the way he is. I love him. He is like a brother to me. But I'm also just in the same way. I don't allow someone to take up and hog the space if you just don't know how to share, and you have to learn how to share. And if he was here, I'm sure he's going to, if he listens to this, I hope that we do more sharing.
Yeah.
But if he does speak over me, I'm going to speak over you. That's a moment where I tell the public constantly, I want people to see, I want people to judge. Do you not see that someone is interrupting me? So I'm going to make this podcast. I'm sorry, folks, but I'm going to make this podcast inaudible, or
Right.
like I don't know what else to do at this point. But he is not letting me talk. And we've had Jacob on the show, by the way, and we've tried to sort of coach around and manage the shouting or the interruptions. But and you mentioned about male banter. I think maybe you might disagree, Andy. I see my brother, for example, he talks in a way that people have said is intimidating, or that's one. And then there's two, where I have uncles and cousins who sort of give cheeky, smart comments and sarcastic things, and so I've navigated those spaces, and I'm used to saying something as well, and hearing it and responding to it very quickly. But I try to remain my cool, because I think, you can't get too stressed in this. Trump's going to be gone. He's going to die because he's old.
Yeah.
And we're all going to get old. But I don't mean to offend anyone. He's getting there. He's 70 something years old. And, you can't lose yourself because of one man. I'm worried sometimes about my friend Jake, because, he truly adores. He has that Trump on his shirt, and he loves Trump. He has an altar, and he has the mask of Trump. And eventually, when Trump dies, what will you have? You can't lose your friendships or your family because of someone. And so politics are going to continue, and to be in this fight, to be in this struggle, you have to keep it cool. You have to just understand that there are lives. Like, that's how I do take these serious. Like, he's talking about people that look like me, that are crossing borders at this time for many different reasons, and I try not to take it personal on my level, but I try to defend workers and not think always these are Latinos, my people. I think about anyone, whether you're a Brit. Like, I have a friend that from England that overstayed his visa in the USA, and he was deported. And I think about him, and I think about Asians, and I think about Arabs, and I think about Latino. I think about anyone, even if you're white, or it doesn't matter to me what color. You're a worker, and you have a right to migrate. We had episodes on this, and I think about them, and I try to fight for open borders and for us to be, a more humane society in the world. But what can I say? I don't know how Jacob. I think what happens is he loves Trump so much that anything he does, he has to justify it through the rhetoric that he hears and through what he listens to. So
yeah, I mean, I think those talking points he's doing, I'm familiar with. You use the term conflict, and you and I have had conflicts. We've had conflicts kind of on the show at times.
Yeah,
I think our more significant conflicts have been offline. But would you describe what you and Jake are doing as having conflict? Like, are you in conflict within these discussions? Tell me. I'm not, because I don't know.
After that, he walked out and turned off the virtual call. He didn't talk to me for days. I texted him afterwards and I said, "Get back on. What are you doing?" Or, talk to me. And his head hurt and he didn't want to talk to me anymore. So he didn't even want to. I don't know if he wanted to post the episode. He waited a bit, and he spoke to me finally on, I think it was on the Tuesday. We would record on Friday, and I was concerned. I really was concerned. And I want us to have conflict, but I also want us to maintain our friendship. And that's hard. People don't know how to do those things. Those are the challenges of being in a relationship. You know, whether it's a romantic one or a friendship one or whatever it is. You know, it really is a challenge. And politics have separated people.
Yeah. So it was kind of a conflict. And what would you say, what do you think you're trying to accomplish on that show then? Like now that's what it is. Like, and unless you think it's going to change.
I know that Jake reminds me a bit of my grandmother. My grandmother does not concede. She does never wrong.
Yeah.
And people who have always told me, you're never going to change her. She's unchangeable, and she is the way she is. She's set in her ways. But I have been the only out of the 19 grandchildren. I'm the oldest, and I'm the only one that has challenged her. You know, and she's gradually changed over time. Made to think things, you know, because my grandmother, just like me, she doesn't. She has stamina. She will have conflict with you and to the end. And now she doesn't do that anymore. She's older now. But I remember when I was a kid, you know, I'd argue with her. I'm glad I was given that space. I don't think my dad liked that very much. But, you know, and over time, one of the things that my grandmother would do, she had this thing about talking about the partners of her children. So she'd talk about the partners of my aunts, her daughters, or the partners of her sons, my uncles and my dad, and she'd speak crap about my mother being a mother-in-law. And every single one of my cousins would say that, oh, that's what grandma does. That's what grandma. And I said, no, I don't tolerate that. I don't like coming over grandma's house and talking shit about my mom. And so I challenge her and challenge her and challenge her. And you know, eventually she'd hear out these things. She never conceded, never said she agreed, never said, but eventually she'd think about what I would say, and she'd, you know, change a bit. She'd change the way she'd think about these things, because I would challenge her. Well, you weren't there, Grandma. When this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And I bring to light things that she wouldn't have otherwise known about had we not had those conflicts. So in having these discussions, I don't think Jake will concede. I don't think Jake, especially being in public, I'm willing to concede in public. You know, I have been wrong so many times on What's Left. People can see things that I've been staunched about and then suddenly say I've been wrong about it, because you have to have humility and you have to be honest. And that's the thing about being on What's Left. And one of the traits you constantly say that you like, that the conversations we have are honest, and that's the reason why we're on What's Left. It's because of the honesty in my development online, you know, over the years. And I will retract something I said, or I will say I was wrong about that. Unfortunately, I don't know. I don't think, because Jacob, there's a lot of ego for anybody, really. And when you're in public that way, you don't want to be revealed, or you don't want to be wrong. So, for example, Jacob, in the first episode, said, and people can look at the first episode, he said that Mohammed Khalil, one of the people who organized a protest at Columbia University, he said that he passed out Death to America flyers. And, you know, I said, where? Show me. And he went back and looked at videos and stuff. He could not find it. And he still would not say. And to this day, I keep saying to him, I said, you fucking said he passed out flyers. Where's that fucking video and your evidence? And he will not concede. And that's an example of Jake. He just will not. He will not concede. And I know, though, he's changed what he said, though. And it makes him think, you know, what am I listening to? I know he's thinking it now. Like, I have to really think about what I'm hearing, because those headlines are very bloody and gruesome and attractive. And you know, you hear these bloody headlines and you think to yourself, my God, we have to be against the immigrants. Oh my God, Mohammed Khalil is a Hamas. It's tied to Hamas.
Yeah.
You know, And I can see Jacob in real time. I can see him. I'm watching him, how he's looking things up, because he's doesn't realize the things he's regurgitating. He said that these protesters are Hamas tied. And I said, do you think all 300 revoked visas are Hamas tied? There's 300. And he looked up the number to see if I was correct or not, and he was like, suddenly he changed the Hamas tied thing to, well, you shouldn't be saying things if you're in this country, and you should just say you should love America. So now it went from Hamas tied to now you shouldn't say anything and disrespecting the country if you're an immigrant. So it changes, and that's the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah,
and that's the thing about politics and that's what politicians do. And I told Jacob, and I will call him out on it. I don't like how disingenuous you are, and be honest. But he won't concede. I know my friend for a long time, and I just know personal things about his personal history and why he won't concede.
Do you think, though, that in that environment, do you think you could say, "Oh, I was wrong about this," or wrong, right? Do you think that environment will allow you to do that or maintain that? Or maybe put it this way: do you think if you continue to do that show, because I get the sense what you want to do actually is like what you said with your aunt. Like, I'm here now, I'm in for the long haul, and I think
my grandmother, right?
Yeah, like your grandmother. I'm sorry, like your grandmother.
Yeah.
I hear you saying, I'm here, I'm in for the long haul, I can wear you down, and that's what I'm going to do. Is that so? But let me ask you this: do you think this kind of environment would change you, or you're not worried about that?
No, I don't want to wear down my co-host. I want to find pockets of ways to meet each other. But if that's not my intention. I don't intend to wear him down. I do know that if someone else tries to wear me down, I will wear them down too. But if I see them finding a way to, all right, what did you have to say? If they want, okay, then I'll stop with the shouting match. Okay, well, there's an opportunity here for us to talk to each other. So that's my intention. If we're going to have dialogue, then sure, we'll have that dialogue. But if you're going to shout at me, I'm going to shout at you back. And that's what we have then. We're just going to have a fucking podcast where we shout at each other. But if you do eventually, and we've discussed this, like I said to Jacob, if you keep doing that, I'm just going to do the same thing to you. And in the second episode, he tried to mute me. And I said, fucking mute me then, censorship guy, And then on the third episode, we tried again. And, I use the word reclaiming my time the way they do in Congress. And then he copycat me. And then he's like reclaiming my time. But I do want to try to have an honest conversation if he wants to.
Yeah.
And what I see are two things. I hope that you critically think, for Jacob, I hope that he critically thinks what he's listening to or what he is reading or just surrounding himself with. And two, this is a way for me, as I had said on my reflections from last year, this is a way for me to get at the people who are listening. 19,000 views in this last episode, who are MAGA supporters, who are Trump supporters. I'm speaking to them as well. I'm not just speaking to Jacob. This isn't just, this for me to reach Jake. This is for me to reach to all those people who do support Trump, who voted for Trump, for them to think about what they're saying. Because I know the bullet points of liberal progressives, that what they're going to say. And I'm sure that's what they think I'm trying to do. Jacob constantly attacks the progressive left, the liberal left. And he doesn't attack what I think about. He talks about Biden and open borders. He's not open borders. He talks about the education in school and universities. I'm not for that. We're not on the same page. Liberals and I are not on the same page. They ousted me. They blocked me out. And I'm no longer in that framework of white privilege. The only reason why I brought up white crime or people committing crime by white Americans, it's because I'm only telling you, black people do it, white people do it, illegals do it, legals do it, whoever, it doesn't matter. Crime is going to happen by anybody, you know. I don't know if it'll be heard that way because I'm bringing up the fact that someone's white. I don't know if that's one tactic I'm trying to do, is just forget the identity that you are, you know, and to really tackle that crime is here and immigration is being tied to crime, so that we can prevent people from coming in, and to sort of get to the conversation, if I may, about biometrics, the reasons why these things are happening, and tracking us all on databases to track our lives and micromanage us, because it's the immigrants that we have to take care of ourselves, because they're not documented, and we should all be documented. That's the reason why. That's how we'll know that immigrants are here. But today I was spending a whole day with one of my friends from Venezuela. He's all kinds of ways documented more than I am. Mm-hmm. You know, he's got a real IV and he's proud of it, and he's trying to get himself registered in all kinds of things. And I'm thinking to myself, goodness, get yourself out of that system. You know?
Well, the thing.
So back to quickly. And so, yeah, so not just reaching out to Jacob, also reaching out to that voter base, that MAGA supporter group. And I'm a little bit afraid, I won't lie. I'm a little scared.
Yeah.
Sometimes going into, it's like, I feel as if I'm walking into a Trump rally and talking to people, and I'm a little afraid of what people will do to me, because, you know, people will try and threaten your life and scare you and all kinds of things. I'm not your enemy, though. You know, I roll my eyes and everything because that's my best friend. We know each other, and I roll my eyes at him. But I don't want people to think I think Trump supporters are deplorables. You know, I don't want people to think that I undermine the middle class white America and any working folk in the USA, because those are the people I'm trying to fight for.
Right. Well, it's interesting to me that we've spent so many years doing this together, and you did acknowledge that maybe you were more nervous in the beginning about edits here and what am I saying? This is forever kind of thing. Like that was, you know, what's online. But here you are, you know, really putting yourself in a place where, you know, kind of enemy territory, if you will, you know, like hostile territory for some of the political points that you would make. I personally don't think you're physically in danger with the group, but I do think that it's interesting to me how I don't know if it's how you're willing to put yourself out so much, like given some of the conversations we had in the past. And maybe that's what you were speaking to earlier in the thing, which is you've just sort of, I don't say you're not nervous about that anymore. It's not like you don't care, but you clearly have become more confident to put yourself in an environment. Honestly, Eduardo, I would not put myself in that place to discuss really anything. I don't think, you know, like in what I would describe as a hostile environment. It's like, it's very stressful. It's very stressful for me to watch you go through that. But I see what I hear you saying is you want to see if you can reach Jake, although you don't necessarily know if you will, but you want to show that you can have that discussion and not break apart. That's one thing. And secondly, you believe that Jake can reach an audience that you would like them to hear an alternative viewpoint. And things are going to change over time. Even though we already saw the stuff about Palantir, you know, using their programs to surveil immigrants and legal and illegal, all these technologies that are being talked about in terms of immigration are being meant to be used on all workers ultimately, just like they used terrorism and 9/11 to justify state controls that were ultimately enacted against all of us, and have increasingly come to become more like, oh, now we're talking about internal terrorists. Now we're talking about homegrown terrorists. We're going to use 9/11 tactics on them. And that's what the state does, as you note, is it deflects, it gets you to think about somebody who is also a victim of that state, and and see that in doing so, you are handing over to your real enemy, the state, the power to control them which means that they're going to have the power to control you. And you think they're doing you a favor, and they're not. You are handing over, in the name of stopping a violence or some other thing, you are handing over a weapon to a much more violent force, which is our rulers. But people don't see it that way. And certainly,
yeah, it's unfortunate. I do try to, I wish Jacob was interested in what I had to say. He says, we just disagree. That's what he says.
Yeah.
You can't disagree if you don't even know what you are disagreeing about. You have, he has a website for our podcast, and he did my bio, and he didn't put anything about anarchism or anything about my my ideology. He what he put was liberal progressive. And everyone knows on What's Left, who've been following us, I've long left the liberal progressive left.
You were kicked out and you left them.
Yeah. And I've criticized them, and I've criticized AOC and criticized Bernie Sanders, and it's unfortunate he doesn't know who I am. I asked him questions about who he is, and I did in one of the episodes, and he just spitted out Trump MAGA discourse. I wanted to know what he actually was about, and it's like, oh.
Where do you see these episodes going? Like, because I looked at the first ones. A lot of them are at immigration. Are you you can't stay there forever. Where do you see Bantercast going in terms of what it will cover or what you guys will go back and forth about?
I hope that once Jake gets things out of his system, maybe he'll be interested in what I actually have to say. He says Biden is for open borders. You and I know that's not true. We are for open borders. I truly am for open borders. I would like for him to ask me what that means. I would like him to ask me about other societies that I have admired and do admire, like the Zapatistas, and to not label me, and why I think that we should be armed. And I say this as a lay Buddhist. I'm not a monk.
Right.
I drink, I curse, and I think we should be armed, and I think we should have abortions. But that he should ask me those questions and how I think our societies. We were having it's interesting. We had a discussion in the last episode after being online, and he was calm, and I said to him, I wish you would concede to the fact that you don't have a country where you can be fully autonomous and and have a self-government the way that you can in Mexico. And I think criticism against the USA is a criticism, like it takes it so personal.
Yeah.
And you can't progress, you can't move forward if you don't criticize the very country you're in. And so I have lots of criticisms about my country, about Mexico, but one of the things I would like to see is I'd like to see an armed resistance in the USA, and you don't have that. And he says that there are the Amish. No, they don't. They pay taxes, and they're still controlled by rules and regulations and laws. I'd love to see autonomous groups rise up the way that in Mexico you have 3 to 4 communities that have kicked out the cartels, have kicked out the police, have kicked out politicians, arming themselves. And it's not a perfect society, of course not. But that's the kind of occupation I'd like to see. And there's nothing wrong with occupation. And I hate being dragged and pulled into the US American system and defending it and how things have to be lawful and everything. I don't want to do that. But I use his framework against him to tell you, it doesn't make any sense what you're saying, and everyone has freedom of speech. And I asked him in the second episode, is your ideal, in the third episode actually, what's your ideal world in a society? Would you think everybody has the freedom of speech? And he said, yeah. But then he's saying that if you're an immigrant in the USA, you should shut up. Well, then that you don't make any sense at all. Then you're not actually a freedom of speech advocate. You are only certain people can have freedom of speech, not others.
Right. Yeah.
So back to what your question is, maybe we'll delve into some of those. I hope it's not just immigration. We'll delve into these other topics that I think are important. There's so many other topics, that we have discussed that I think we can delve into.
Yeah. And how do you feel? Because for me, it's stressful to watch. Do you get stressed out in preparing for that? And how are you feeling during the episodes? Like, is it a bad feeling? Is it like, or does it actually, like, is it one that brings you more to life?
If people don't know, I raised an adolescent, so I've learned over time not to get stressed. Here I am using this mic.
Right.
Maybe we'll do some ASMR. No, I truly have learned in 36 years old now, and that might be young to some, old to others, but I have learned to not get stressed, because I used to get very stressed with the adolescent, my charge that I raised, and I've learned to not get as stressed and to keep my cool. And I analyze what Jake says, and sometimes I'm baffled, and so I just don't know how to react. I don't think I'm angry. I'm like, that sounds like a Fox News headline you read.
All right. Right.
He described a bloody scene on one of the episodes about someone, and that's not to undermine the horror of these crimes that he's trying to talk about, but I'm just thinking to myself, goodness, you've just been listening like Orwellian news, the whole time. You've just been repeated all this stuff, and crime is an issue, but it is not the reason. That's the reason why they're giving us the reason to hate immigrants and to loathe them and to not let them into the country. And there are other things too that he does. Is he talks about vandalism. Do I agree with vandalism? Only if it's Elon Musk, only on Tesla cars. No, I just don't give a fuck about vandalism. I had a teenager that does graffiti. What he continues, I don't know if he does to this day, but did graffiti on the streets, and I used to tell him, just don't do it on houses, So what am I supposed to say about that? He wants me to have the left is out of control, the wild left, the violent left. They're trying to, they're writing Nazi signs on cars, and I'm like, if it's telling Elon Musk he has money to clean it up, I just don't care. Or, he talks about the assassination attempts on Trump, and I just respond, it's a scary world. It is a scary world where if you speak your mind, especially politicians, whether you're on the left or the right or Democrat or Republican, you're going to get your life in jeopardy. I think our real life in jeopardy are mostly from the government that's going to target us. What we say. I think that's scarier. I've been thinking about that. I think it was 2 days ago. I was scared about the things that I am saying, because he asked me at one point if I think that the ruling class or the elite class, the wealthy class, what would we do if we had a revolution? And I said, I think, and I'm saying it here, I think that the working class would have to decide that in a public court. Mm-hmm. And I said, and that might just be very consequential. And I think some people might interpret that as, killing. I didn't say anything about killing. It could be in prison. They could hold them hostage. I don't know. But I know revolutions are also violent. Look at the Mexican Revolution. Look at the US American Revolution. Look at the French Revolution. I mean, I have learned that through our discussions. You and I have had offline discussions, and I remember we had a discussion about that. And I said, Andy, how do you think a revolution will come about? And you said to me, because I asked you about guns and arming ourselves, and you said to me, it might be violent, unfortunately. That might happen. I don't think, and I will repeat here, I don't think we're anywhere near that. We're not anywhere near a working class movement or working class revolution. But, that history has told us that people take matters in their own hands. But that doesn't always have to be violent. It could be imprisonment. That something like that could happen. And he thinks that I'm just, I don't know. I think he thinks I'm a pacifist or something. I don't know. Because I've always, in the past, I used to talk about that.
Right.
But that scares me that I even said that, and even scares me now, even saying this on this podcast. I have to defend myself.
Yeah, I mean,
with the AI, anything that we picked up, we just talked about that with Jake Lysick.
Yeah, I think, again, when people use these things of violence, and they talk about street crime or gang crime, or even like these murders you're talking about, they leave out U.S. policy that has led to the destruction of Ukraine, U.S. policy that has led to the destruction in Gaza, or even U.S. policy that basically, I mean, they openly say that we're going to arm Taiwan, but if Taiwan loses and China lays claim to it, we will level the entire country so that they can't use manufacture chips out of Taiwan. So they're basically saying we'll scorch earth it, so there'll be nothing left for the Chinese to use. That's policy. So everyone clutches their pearls about these little specks of violence and these giant boulders of violence that are both committed and are planned by our own rulers. We just say, oh well, those are countries, they get to do that. And the reality is if there was ever a threat to their power by us, we will have to defend ourselves, because for sure they will eliminate people like they did at the Black Panther Party. They did it to the Native American movement. I don't mean just in terms of like, back in the 1800s and 1700s. I mean, like, there was a Leonard Peltier and things like that, and the way the CIA had gone in there and shot up a bunch of people who were Native Americans who they thought were fighting for Native American rights, and they'll do it over and over. They've done it throughout history. So we're not there. I do think we need to get there, but people should have no illusions that we live in a society run on violence, because capitalism is violence. And at the same time, they get us to talk about these little mini episodes that are way downstream of the source of it all, and talk about it as if this is the stuff that's happening, and we ignore the giant waterfall of violence on top of us. So it's a trick they play, but it seems to be pretty effective.
Yeah, especially when you just call out numbers instead of names.
Yeah, and well, we started this with the idea of, and this whole episode even started with the idea of us possibly showing some of Bantercast and putting it on YouTube. Number one, is that something you still want to do? And I don't know about Jake on it, but two, you kind of had talked about it in terms of like wanting this audience who knows you to know you're doing that. And I think that's the idea of us putting some Bantercast episodes into our same, letting YouTube subscribers, they're going to get some of that stuff. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think I had originally thought we would just be, what do you call it, streaming or connecting Bantercast to What's Left. But then you had convinced me that we need to stick to what our audience has subscribed to and what they should expect. And I thought about that. And I think what I'd like for people to do is, if you're interested in what I am doing, then you can migrate over to Bantercast and see what I'm doing there. I have to ask Jake for permission, since we're co-hosting together, even though it feels like it's his podcast.
Yeah.
I'm always jabbing Jacob. We could, if we could post a few that I think are good, we could even use some as substitutes. I was thinking, even if anyone had any ideas of that, they would please write in the comments or send us an email or write to us at whatsleftpodcast.com. I think I'd like for people to see some of the work that I'm doing. It's not just about Jacob. I want to be clear. This is a time to reach out. I think, again, just as we did in 2020 to the other side. And it's unfortunate I have to say the other side, but I think people are again making them dividing themselves in lines, and to reach out to the other side so that we can come together again and not be delusional to think that Trump is our savior. You know, Jacob adores Trump, and yet it's not the president you think he is. And even the whole system has to be questioned. But if I can reach get some through this other podcast, if I can just speak to that public, 19,000 views on just the fourth episode. That was this last Friday. 19,000 views. That's a lot of views. I'm going to send that signal out there and put myself out there and expose myself and take a risk. So again, like I'm saying, it's not just about my friend Jake. Sure, I'm hoping that maybe just like my grandmother, something will stir and rotate in there somewhere in his mind, and maybe he'll find the humility to concede on some points. But it's beyond that. It really is beyond that. I want people to not divide themselves into this left and right spectrum.
Yeah. Well, listening to you, I've certainly become more convinced that if there are specific episodes that you really think we should send to our What's Left audience on YouTube, then we should do that. And maybe put a little in the description, why we're sending it and why you're sending it, kind of thing. And I think that'll be good. But I definitely think people should know, this is what you're doing, and this is another place to go. We won't be able to put we can put the link in the description to the YouTube video, but we have to put it not as a link. We have to put it in words, you know what I'm saying? So we'll have to figure out how to do that. And if folks want to get to it, I mean, you can find it. If you search YouTube or if you search Rumble, people will find a way of getting it. But now people know about it, at least some of the people who watch our show.
Yeah. So check me out over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Migrate over there and support me and rally and give me a hand over there.
No,
I'm trying to also, if you can see, trying to get the right equipment, because sound is so important. And my sound on the computer has been terrible. So I've been trying to use better sound. And so let's see if I can. It's
going to be much harder to interrupt you when you get on one of those rolls, when you're just right on there on the microphone. You can just roll right over him.
Lastly, I really truly do love Jacob. We've been friends now. This is 20 years this year, because we met in 2005 and this is 2025, and he was 15 and he was 16 and I was 17, and now I'm 36 and he's 35. And so I'm not conspiring against him. Everything I'm saying is honest. I truly do want us to build something together. I do get frustrated with him, but I've always been frustrated with him. I've always been, putting up with his shit.
Right. So, right. Yeah, this is nothing new. And people can go back into other What's Left episodes and hear Eduardo talk about Jacob. So, and maybe on some of our other platforms, I'll put a link to the initial interview we had of Jake. It was very early in when we
Yes, he was an anarchist capitalist.
Maybe it's pro-capitalist anarchist. That's what he was.
Yeah, something like that. He was for free markets, and actually, we had a discussion around immigration. He was like, "I don't think borders, because you're restricting at times capital."
Yeah,
and so
that's right. He was a pro-capitalist anarchist. That's what it was. Yeah.
So he was trying to
certainly pro-capitalist. I'm not sure if he's an anarchist anymore.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And I know I described it as he's trying to. I think I said something like he's trying to eat pasta with mayonnaise or something, and some weird combo there. Anyhow, all right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me. Let me finish this out here, and I appreciate this, folks. If you like anything, please go over to Bantercast. I'm going to now terminate us here as we conclude. All right, well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog on Whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog, and you can certainly contact me through @Don Eduardo Barca. I will answer your questions as I try. With many of the questions in the past have been sent to me there. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Andy Lipson, and thank you all for listening. Check us out next time. Ciao.
Bye-bye.